What's your baby's name?
His name's gonna be Judah.
Wait, you told me that.
Did I?
Judah. Yeah. Get your praise on. Yeah, Judah. Oh yeah, yes, and then I said that's a better one than Judas. Right? Something like that. I remember this conversation.
Deja vu.
I'm sure someone's named their baby Judas. But why would you
Probably an
ever
atheist.
do that?
Someone who wasn't thinking.
Possible. All right. Are we on, Nate? Are we rolling?
So did we just tell the world that the kid's gonna be named Judah? I almost said Judas.
The baby's going to be, for those of you watching at home, the baby's going to be Judah, not Judas. Don't worry. Everything's orthodox and sound here at Calvary Chapel, including the leaders and the youth pastors. Okay. So, today we are covering chapters 18 and 19, and they actually go together pretty well. And I will show you why. Chapter 18 is the middle passive voice of the present tense. And then chapter 19 goes through the active and middle voices for the future tense. Okay? Now, it's been a little while since we've used those words in a classroom setting, so it might be like, what? Those, all those big words that we don't really use. But it's not that bad. So, let's dive in. To be honest, because, we'll do a little bit of translation concept, let's say, regarding like going over what is the active voice, what is the middle voice, what is the passive voice. That's all super easy. But present and future tense, it's the same. It works the same as it does in English. So mostly what we're going to be doing during this teaching time is just looking at the paradigms. That's basically what you're going to need to get down pat for today, because the rest is going to be very intuitive for you. So, there's like paradigms on every page. I'm trying to pick which one they're basically all the same. Anyway, okay. So, we so far have done the present active indicative. We did that in chapter 16. And then in chapter 17, we did the same thing. We just did contract verbs, which was still the same tense, voice, and mood. It's just that the stem ended in one of three vowels, right? For a contract verb, what are those three vowels?
Alpha, omega, epsilon, omega.
Oh, yeah, so the stem would just be alpha, because omega would be your personal ending.
Oh.
So like agapa-o, it's agapa, right? Mm-hmm. So alpha, epsilon, like poi-e-o, and then the third one that he gives for an example is play-ra-o, right? That play-ra, that stem ends in an omicron. And so all that meant was that there will be some contraction that happens basically at the end of the stem and right before the personal ending. So instead of, agapa, amen, for we love, it morphs into what? Agapumen, most likely. There's a change, there's a circumflex. but the ending's still the same. You can still tell what's going on, right? So now we're actually moving into a different voice. So the first one, which was the first paradigm for the verb, was, let's see if this is one of the, yeah, I believe it is. That writes nice. Luo. What were the rest of them?
Luis. Lue.
Okay.
Luamen.
Can I get someone else to give me a couple?
Cool, man.
Luamen. Anyone else want to give me the next one? I'm just trying to get multiple people involved. You're all doing great. Luete. What's our third? Oops. Luusen. Yeah. Those are parentheses. Okay. What do these mean? How do these translate?
I lose.
I loose.
You lose.
You loose. He, she, it looses. Luamen would be we loose. Luete.
You snooze.
You loose, and that's plural. That's a plural you right there. Yeah, it is. And loosen. They loose. What if it were progressive or continual?
I am
I am loosing.
losing.
You are loosing. Lue would be
He, she is losing.
he, she, it is loosing. Luamen is
We
we is loosing. But please, on a test, put we are loosing if you can help it. We is loosing, yo. And if you do is, you have to put yo after it. Luete.
Y'all losing.
You are loosing. Loosen.
Baby's losing.
They are loosing, and that's because with the present tense, it can be, the translation can be simple, or it can be progressive. Yeah, I don't think I mentioned this to you, but just a random thought about the way that the Greek present can translate. You know the Gungor song, Beautiful Things? You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of dust and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, the bridge says what? What are the lyrics of the bridge?
You make me new. You are making me.
Yes, right? So it'd be something like, actually, what would be you make?
Oh man.
From the word you know.
I know it, but I'm not gonna
Oh yeah. Oh. Oh yeah.
You make,
So.
inflect that bad boy for me. Come on.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Poies,
Poies.
right? Because it's second person singular, talking to God directly, right? You make, so it's poieo, but you plug in that second person singular ending. So, poies, but you got your circumflex because it's a contract, right? What's me? You make me. Me would be what case?
Me? What case? Oh, the case.
Yep.
Signal.
Because
Accusative.
it would be accusative because it's the direct object, right? And it's what was I about to say? I don't know. Anyway, about the word, it's from ego, right? That's the pronoun that means I, but this is singular, and it's accusative. So what would the form be? What would it look like? Oh no, they switched to begin with M, with a mu, excuse me. It's like ego, mu, moi.
Meh.
Meh. Looks just like me in English.
Right.
Pues, meh? What's the word for new? I don't think you know that yet, do you?
New.
It would be kainos. Kainos is a word. There's more than one word.
Oh, that's
Good
no. No?
Well, maybe you're thinking of oida or gnosko.
Goodness.
But meh, and then
The internet knows.
What is it?
Yeah.
kainos. Well, if it's kainos, what would this form be if we're looking for accusative singular and the lexical form's kainos? What?
Kaine.
Well,
Oh wait, no, it ends with the it's in third declension, right?
and I'm writing it, and I'm a man, so let's make it
Oh yeah, because it's an adjective,
Kaine.
right?
No.
kainon. Yep, right? Just like the ending for logos, because it'd be second declension. So, what does this say? You make me new. Pues me kainon. And then how would you say the second line? You are making me new. How would you say that part?
Exactly.
You would say the exact same thing, right? Pues me kainon. Right? So, I forget what it was. I was in chapel one day at Moody, and we were singing that, and I was like, oh, if we were singing this in Greek, it would be the exact same line twice. You make me new, you are making me new. And then I wonder, like, if an ancient Greek were to be singing this, would, how would they know that there is a different, maybe in modern Greek there's some way to make the distinction, but, So that's interesting. If you're translating into a language that only has one form for both of those aspects, what do?
You don't.
What do you do? Yeah, you just don't. They skip the bridge. Back to verse 1. Okay. FYI, under the Snapple cap, Greek excursion is over. Okay. This is Luo, present active indicative, paradigm. You have all done so well. Now, the middle passive has different endings. Can we do this paradigm? I mean, if you have to, you can look at it. They're in several locations. So there's one on 150. What would be the first one? The first person singular?
Luamai?
Luamai, right? And is the accent over that upsilon?
Yes.
Good, I've been pronouncing it correctly. What I did realize when I first taught Greek grammar this past fall was that there's certain words that I've memorized in a certain way, the paradigm for them, and I wasn't paying attention to the accents, and I'm like, oh man. So like, when we would go over them, I'd have to it was so hard to emphasize them differently. It was so hard. Cool. Actually, didn't even put it in. So, Luamai, and what's the next one?
Lua.
Lue, what is special?
With a little yoga.
Definitely need that. And remember, it's an eta. It's not an epsilon iota, right? It's not the diphthong. It's an eta. Okay. What about the next one?
Luetai.
Luetai, right? Luetai. Luetai. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of a mnemonic device. But I've got nothing. Luetai. What about the next one?
Luametha.
Luametha, right? Now, when you're looking, Luametha, then, you can see some similarities there, right? The met part. These endings for these two paradigms, you are going to get really used to them because they just show up all the time. They're used in other tenses as well. They show up quite a bit. So you are going to get used to them. Trust me. What's the next one? Go ahead and look at where that luesta. Yeah, a little different in English. I think we're not really used to ending a lot of words with short vowel sounds. It feels weird, but it does happen. Happens in. There was this dude who spoke for this World Christianity class we did in the fall. The class was almost entirely comprised of guest speakers from around the world. We had like over 50 participants, and it was really cool. It was my job to email all these people and set the schedule and stuff. And this dude, bigwig and a really cool guy too. I got to spend a lot of time with him, showing him how to download Google Talk and Google Voice stuff, because he's an older man, you know. But his last name, he's from Germany, and his last name is Hille. So we look at that and we just want to say Hill, but it's Hille, you know. Got that eh at the end. So I tried to do German there and say it correctly. But hey, other languages, sometimes you gotta do the eh, ah sort of stuff at the end. What can you do? So, lastly, we have Luantai. Maybe that could help you. You could.
That one is like untie.
You untie?
You loose.
Right? Yes. Luantai. They untie. You're never going to forget this. Although it's middle passive, so it's
Yeah.
they are being untied or something like it. Well, it depends.
They are being untied.
Okay. So this is present active. This one is present middle passive. Now, why is it middle/passive? The reason is because in the present tense, the middle and passive voices are the same. There's not two distinct paradigms. So that's nice for memorization. It's one less paradigm that you need to know. But what happens is in translating, sometimes you're wondering, well, which one is it? And a lot of times it's passive. The middle in general is just a voice that's not as common as the passive, particularly the active. Obviously, most writing just uses active verbs, but that's overly simplified. There's more to it than that, but we'll talk about these things later. Okay, so if this is I lose, you lose, he loses, that sort of stuff, what are these? How do we translate them? Let us embark on this translative journey together right now. Luamai. I am being loose. Let's do this. Let's first go through them and do a simple instead of a continuous present translation. So, I am loosed. Right? Now, what's interesting is sometimes with certain verbs, when they're passive, we, I think, naturally go to like a progressive. And so it's a little weird to say, I am loosed. You know? But it's right. It's right. It's okay. I am loosed. Lue?
You are loose.
You are loosed. Luetai? Yeah. Luametha?
We are loose.
We are loosed. Lueste?
We are loose.
Luamtai?
They are loose.
Okay. Now continual. Luamai?
I am being loose.
Lue?
You are being loose.
Luetai?
He, she, it is being loose.
Luametha?
We are
We are being loose.
What's that?
Y'all are being loose.
And Luantad?
They are being loose.
Yup. Hey. Very nice. So, those are the presents. Now, we also, in the next chapter, well, okay. Before I talk about the next chapter, I was wondering specifically when he introduces deponent verbs. And he does introduce deponents in this chapter. So, can anyone tell me what a deponent verb is? Yes, Matt.
It is a verb that is always translated as active, even though its form may be in the passive.
Yes. So there are certain verbs that, and this information is on page 152. There are certain verbs that do not appear in the active voice. They always are middle passive. Or passive, depending upon what tense it is. However, they translate as active. Okay? Now, you get used to it. There's a couple of deponent verbs that are really, really common. One of them is this word. Can anyone pronounce that word for me?
Erchomai.
Yep, just make that omicron a short O sound.
Erchamai.
Yep. Okay. Erchamai. It means I come or I go. So you can imagine, especially in narratives like in the Gospels, that word shows up a lot. And Jesus went, and they went, and like that sort of stuff, because went, right, is a past tense from go in English, right? So I come or I go is this word. Now, I just wrote erchamai. Why didn't I write ercho? Because lexical forms of verbs have an omega at the end, correct?
Yes.
Now, why then is this lexical form, why does it end in amai?
Because it's a deponent.
Yep, because it's deponent. And so it never shows up with the omega. It does not. Now, I will say this. There are certain verbs, when you're looking in the back of your book, it'll have, the lexical form will be amai. And so you're going to be like, okay, it's deponent. But for some of the words, that just means that it's deponent in the New Testament. If you get outside of the New Testament, maybe especially with older Greek, there is an active form. So if you were looking in a different lexicon that goes over like more Greek than just what's in the New Testament, like the Liddell Scott Jones lexicon or other big ones like that, there might actually be active forms. So just keep that in mind, that your textbook is specifically the New Testament vocabulary. But most of you are probably just going to solely focus on the New Testament anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I should tell you that because that's the case. So words like erchamai, when you're looking at them up in the back of the book, if you're looking for ercho, because you forget what it means, you're not going to find it. And so the reason is because it doesn't ever show up in an active voice. The active voice doesn't exist. It is deponent. Therefore, the middle passive ending, first person singular, is your lexical form. So, for deponent verbs. Luamai, though, because it can show up in the active, its lexical form is luo. So, for verbs, this isn't too bad. For verbs, the lexical form is either going to end in omega or amai. Oh, the vast majority of verbs are not deponent. So when you see a verb, in your workbook, you're not sure what it is, but you see like, let's say archametha, something like that. Archametha, because I think that verb happens to be deponent in your book. You would look up archo, because you realize it's a verb. So you're like, okay, ametha is the ending, it's probably archo. I look it up, it's not there. Well, ametha was a middle passive ending. It could be deponent. You don't see archo? Look for archamai. Those are your two options. So remember though that with the words that are deponent, the translation is active. Some of them are fairly natural because if you tried to put them in the middle passive, it's difficult. This word means go. Patrick, take this word, I go, okay? Let's say make it third person plural, keep it present, but make it passive.
Archanatai?
No, I want you to say it in English.
Oh.
The translation. So erkamai, make it third person plural, translate it into English, but make it passive.
They.
Yeah. Well, how about this? First do active. First do it active.
Okay. From go.
Yes. They.
have come.
Oh no, that's a perfect tense you just gave me. Just do it a simple present tense. They in English. They what?
Oh, they go.
They go. Okay. Now make that passive.
They go, but they don't really feel like it.
Okay.
That was cute.
That's a good suggestion.
It's probably really easy, but I'm overthinking.
They are going.
Well,
They
just give me a guess.
I want to say they went. Like, but that's past tense.
I know. It's really weird, isn't it? They go, they are gone? No, that doesn't. They
They
are.
have gone.
It's almost like you have to bring in a causative helping verb, like they are made to go, or something like that. It's really awkward, isn't it?
They'll
Put
probably
it,
go.
huh?
They'll probably go.
They'll probably go.
It's future
Well,
tense.
not that's more of a subjunctive idea, but
I don't think you, for that particular verb, I don't think there is a passive.
it's kind of hard,
I mean,
right?
because
You're going.
you're the one, you do it, can't have that done to you, because
Yes, and part of it is whether the verb is transitive or intransitive. Does it take an object? This verb happens to not take an object, it takes an indirect object. I go, I don't go something, I don't go the marker,
Somewhere.
I go to this place. That sort of thing, right? Or with this person. It's taking indirects. But not all deponents are like that. But I just like to point that out that some are. Sometimes it makes sense. But not always. But that's just fun to think about. Making go passive. Yay. Okay. So
Is
that's
this only a problem for translating into English, and are there perhaps other languages that it works for, in which these deponent verbs would not really be a thing?
like making you mean specifically the example of trying to make them passive? Or do other languages have deponent verbs?
Yes. Well, like what we have deponent verbs because we're trying to translate into English, and something doesn't exist there, right? Like
Yeah.
they have a concept in Greek that we don't have in English.
I guess, I don't know, I wonder if you were speaking to a native ancient Greek speaker, right, like back in the day, you could go back, what they would say about that. And actually, there are probably writings where they discuss it, you know, in some sort of ancient treatise, but I haven't personally looked into it. But I know other, like Latin has deponents, but they're both case grammar languages. So, I don't know. I can't say anymore. Okay. Active, middle passive. These are deponents. So, let's talk about the future. Okay? That's
Tense,
right.
Future of life.
Which
Future.
is I could say, let me tell you your future. I know it will involve studying Greek, but let me tell you the future. Tense of Greek in the active in the middle. Okay, so some of you have probably looked at the paradigm, and yeah, I guess we can flip to it. Go ahead and look at 159. There's one there. This is it's the future active indicative, and I love it because it's so easy. Yes. How does the future translate? If I were singing the bridge to Beautiful Things, and I put that in the future, Dan, what would I say?
You will make me. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan, I do expect you to sing it.
I'm not gonna sing it.
Okay, you don't have to. I was hoping. You will make me new. What about the second line?
You will be making.
Yes, not as euphonic, huh? Doesn't sound as nice, does it? You will be. It's too wordy. It's too wordy. So that's how the Greek future translates. That's pretty easy, huh? Like I said before, I'm not sure if the future in Greek can be both simple and progressive. I keep saying that. I keep forgetting to check. But I think it has to be able to. Because there must be some sort of way to express a continuous idea in the future. But I will say, which I think I mentioned before, I can't really remember rendering a future in a progressive sense yet. Maybe I have, but if so, it's been very rarely. So I think most of the time when you see the future form in Greek, you're just doing a simple future translation. So,
God does.
huh?
I'm saying God does. He's in all of them at the same time. Anyway, that's a
True that. So, look at that paradigm. You're looking at it. It's pretty easy. What's the difference between the future active and the present active?
And a sigma.
You just stick a sigma in there. I believe Mounts calls it a tense formative. When you use different grammars, sometimes they use different terms for this stuff, but I believe he calls it a tense formative. Yeah, he does. So, then he talks about connecting vowels. Tense formative. Just focus on that. Okay? So, if I wanted to say, I will loose, not that I will lose, but I will loose, how would I do this in Greek?
So,
Luso! Yay! What about you will loose? Luces. Right? What about he will lose? Yay. And we will lose? Lusamen. And you will lose. Lucete. And, you know, that last one. They. Lu. Oh, man. No.
It used to be a short word. Now it's got a lot of.
Sorry. I'm not as good as it's getting. It's too low. It's not ergonomic to be, you know. This internship's gonna, you know, can't get injured. Riding that low, it's dangerous. Now, okay. So I will lose, we will lose, they will lose, that sort of stuff. You just stick a sigma in there. That's pretty easy, right? You gotta revel in these easy chapters. Count it as a victory, okay? Victory, Nike. It's where the word Nike, the brand Nike, it's Greek. Yay!
They got it from the famous marathon run, right when Athens was in war, and it was Phidippides had to run the 26 miles, and then he shouted Nike, and then he died.
I believe so, yes. I know it is from one of the war stories,
Was
correct. Did you say was it Peloponnesian War?
No, it was
Or
during the Persian.
Persian Wars?
Yeah.
Okay, so recorded in Herodotus?
Herodotus.
Okay, I haven't gotten to that
Father-
part yet. I'm still like in the middle of it. It's
Well,
600 pages.
yeah, it's very thick.
Yeah.
The father of history.
Was that mean victory, was it? What did they shout?
Yeah,
He
that.
shouted Nike because he.
Which is Nike, which were Nike?
Yeah.
Yep, Nike comes from the Greek word. Now you know their secret. Now you know how to make millions, maybe even
Huh?
billions off of
Yeah, he
basketball
died of
sneakers.
exhaustion because he had to run 26 miles. That's where we got the marathon. He ran 26
That's
miles and
key, the
he
number,
shouted because he had to
26.
alert the king that the Persian, so he shouted that they had won the battle. So he shouted Nike and then he died.
Wow.
Exhaustion.
Yeah, he died a heroic death.
Yeah.
Because he just ran 26 miles.
Yeah,
Marathon's not even there to nothing.
yeah.
I don't wonder.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I know
every
people
day.
who they just need to. You know, they're all tense. They're like, I just need to go run 5 miles. You know, I knew a lot of people like that at school too, and
It's not, it doesn't expand your lung capacity.
I
Maintains it.
lay down.
Next 10 seconds. Go to sleep.
Stressed out. I'm gonna lay in my bed.
Chris has got a few marathons.
Okay, so you know how it translates. You know what it looks like. Remember this? Remember the stops, the square of stops. I didn't tell you to memorize it, and I'm still gonna tell you, don't memorize it. Just remember that, for instance, when we were looking at the dative plural for the third declension, like sarks, when you get out of the nominative for sarks, it's sark with a kappa at the end of the stem, right? Sarka, sarkis, sarka, sarkes, sarkone. And then for dative plural, your ending is sin with the movable nu, right?
Right.
So you have sark, and then you have the sigma after the kappa, and they make a xi. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's, remember, our tense formative for the future is a sigma. So, if your stem ends in one of those consonants that morph when they're next to a sigma, I mean, that's going to happen. So, but the thing is, the sound of it, you'll be able to recognize it, right? So, if you're looking at page 161, they're broken up into 3, labial, velar, dental, all that is. It's just the way that your mouth moves in order to make these sounds. That's why they're called that. And actually, if you are interested in phonetics at all, or just the way that words are formed and sounds are made, it is a cool thing to look into these groups. And you know, you can get on a website that explains the way your mouth and your tongue move when you're saying those sounds, and then, you know, you read it and then you do it. You're like, oh, wow, oh, the back of my tongue does touch the roof of my mouth right there. Oh, wow. It's fun. So go ahead and do that. Okay. So, look at the first, I don't know, what do you call these? Are these columns, rows, whatever? Do you see blepo?
Yeah.
It's under the box, it's to the right. So you see blepo, you got blep for your stem, right?
Yep.
Makes perfect sense. But blep, if I want to say blepo, I see, but I want to put in the future, I will see, I got a sigma I got to put in there, blepso. The P and the sigma make a psi. And it still sounds exactly the same.
That's right, and it still is those same letters, actually.
Yeah, they just, you know, they became something else.
Yeah.
That's, you know, like two caterpillars. It's like they got in one cocoon and became a butterfly
Okay,
of Greek.
good.
That's what it's like.
Gotta
So,
put him down the toilet.
if you look at grapho, the one underneath it, which you know means to write, because you know graphe means writing, scripture and stuff, right? So grapho, if I want to say I will write, I got to stick that sigma in there. Grapso, oh, that becomes grapso. So there, that's a little different, right?
Yeah.
Ps is ps. Not exactly. But the thing is, when you see grapso, or grapsamen, or whatever, you're gonna see it. You're scanning through the verbs you already know. You're realizing, okay, this has to be from grapho because it's got a verb ending, and I only know like 30 verbs or something. So it's got to be grapho, but it's ps, graps. Why is it that? Oh, you know, the sigma tense formative. So even though that one's not as intuitive, I think you can figure it out. Next one down, dioko, which I don't think you've learned that. That means to, it's kind of a cool word. It means to pursue. It's a really forceful word, to pursue. And it also can mean to persecute. So the idea of it is that basically you're pursuing so as to put to flight that which you are pursuing. That's the persecute gloss in certain contexts. So that's dioko. You put a sigma in there, it's dioxo. You could have guessed that. Remember though, a gamma, like ago. So you guys have already learned ago or no? Well, that's okay, but the gamma plus the sigma is also a x. And think about it, agso, agso, agso. That kind of works, right? So, anyway, just remember that. Just remember that, and you will be fine. Now, let's, it gives you that, huh? All right, well, the paradigm for, you know what? Go to page 354. That's right, we're skipping all the rest of this junk. We're going right to the end.
From the appendix.
354.
That's what I said, right?
I think so.
Hard to say.
We're gonna fight the end boss right now. We've leveled up. We're going.
Raid boss?
The what?
The raid boss?
I don't know. Okay. Remember this chart? I showed you guys this chart, and you all thought it was really cool and stuff. I remember. I will pretend I didn't hear that, and then my feelings aren't right. So, look at these columns. You know, the first column, you actually already have that, the first column.
Yeah.
And look at the first column's present, right? First, a paradigm, active indicative, second, middle indicative, and then third is passive indicative. what's up with the middle and the passive? Those two, they're the same one, remember? Only one form for the middle passive. So jump over 2 columns and now you're looking at the future, right? So we just went over the first one, the active indicative. Luso, luces, luce, and so on. We're on page 357.
Oh, wow.
Wait, what did I say?
354.
Did I?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
357 is.
that's,
That looks like the one I was
You-
excited about.
you know what's really odd about that too though, is that this page, I've referred to this page so many times when teaching over the fall, and I
Now
myself
remember being excited.
when I would practice paradigms my first year and write them out, I would check them against this page.
Yeah.
And so I know this page.
Okay.
And I was thinking 357, absolutely, but I said 354.
So which page are we on?
357.
354. No, 357.
Oh, no.
No, I'm just like, what's on 354? Oh, I hate that chart.
See?
That's funny.
I wasn't excited about that.
Yeah, the master verb chart, don't even bother with that. Because this is why, the master verb charts and all that stuff, it's like picking out the connecting vowels and making you memorize just them independently. I just don't, I think it's too hard. Not worth it. Memorize it attached to the words. So 357. Okay. So, all that stuff that I just said, and if you're looking at the third column, it says future at the top. I think everyone's like, oh yeah, it does.
Yep.
Okay, this page works. Now, we just went over the first bit of stuff, right? Luso, luces. If you jump down to the middle indicative, right? We haven't actually written that out yet, but what do you notice about the future middle indicative?
It's the same as the present middle indicative, again with the sigma.
Yes! It's the same thing, you just stick a sigma in there. That is beautiful.
Love how we love future?
Yes, we love the future. We think about it, we plan for it.
And we had a sigma to it.
And we add a sigma to indicate it, yes. What do we do for, let's do future middle. What's how would that translate? Anyone want to say?
Will be loosed.
I will be loosed, right? How do I put that in Greek? How do I write that? So it's all these, you just stick a sigma in them.
Lusamai.
Lusamai, right? Now, what about if I want to say you will be loosed? Loose, right? What about he will be loosed?
Lusatai.
Lusatai, right? And we will be loosed? Lusamatha, right?
Samatha.
This next one is fun to say. What about you all will be loosed?
Lusafe?
Or, you know what? I did make one little boo-boo. Technically, in the future, the middle and the passive are distinct. We're doing the middle. So I shouldn't be saying, like, I will be loosed. It should be, if it's middle,
I will be loosing.
well, I will loose myself. I will loose myself. I will untie myself. Stuff like that. So, sorry about that. I'm sure you forgive me. Let's do this next one. Second person plural, future, middle.
Y'all will lose yourselves.
Yes. How would we say this in Greek? Yeah, yeah, that was a little bit of a
Let's say.
luseste.
Lucesta.
Lucesta. Right? Isn't the accent over the upsilon?
Yeah, but then, okay.
So, Lucesta. 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 Yeah. What about this last one? Lusante.
Yes, it is on time.
Your shoes on time.
Lose on time. And although he doesn't go over it in this chapter, go ahead and look at the next paradigm below it. What do you notice about that? The future passive indicative.
You got your thing?
same.
Ada.
It's the same. It's got the middle passive endings, but instead of a sigma tense formative, it has what?
Face.
Thase. But the same exact endings. So boom, you just plug a thase in there. So that is, the futures are so nice. They're very, very predictable.
Are the pasts as nice?
Well, you can see them right next to the future, the aorist. They are, no, there's more differences in them. But we will get there. Yeah. And you will grow to love them.
Have we covered all the present stuff when it comes to verbs?
Oh, for the indicative mood, yes.
Oh, okay.
So then later on, you'll learn subjunctive and imperative, which with subjunctive, it's basically all the same, just one, the connecting vowel lengthens. So that's usually pretty easy to spot. But yeah, so any questions on that? Yes.
For lexical forms,
Yes.
is the first form always, other than our deponents, going to be the present?
Yes.
And then they just show the first person singular for the other tenses? Like in parentheses under?
Yeah, like.
The
there's
principal
so many.
parts of the verb.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's so many, like under I fall, like
Right.
there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes down like that.
Correct. Okay. I'll talk about principal parts really quickly because I usually talk about them a little more in depth when we start. There's, I think, 2 classes from now we're gonna do first and second aorist, and usually there's a lot of questions about principal parts then, so we go over them more at that time. Because then you realize why you need to know principal parts. So, okay, well, take a look in your lexicon, the back of the book. Look at page 396. And I'm confident that I actually mean 396. I'm believing that we're all looking at the same page. So if you look in the second column, the first blue word is aperkama. Do you see that? Now, aperkamai, of course you're looking right at it so you know what it means, but what does that look like it's made up of 2 words?
Aper and Hama.
Go ahead and say that louder, Dan.
Aper and Hama.
Well, oh, you're close. What was the deponent verb I had up on the board earlier? Erchamai. Now what's up with this one? How does it relate to erchamai?
Could
doesn't
go.
that-
Instead of
To
coming,
go.
you
Instead of to
depart.
go, it means to depart.
There's the up.
Yeah, the alpha P is on the front of
Oh,
it. Exactly. It's from appa, right?
yeah.
It's from it's a preposition in attached to this verb. That's called a compound verb. So one of the when you're I don't know, hearing people talk about how to interpret the Bible and that sort of stuff, sometimes people will talk about it's got different names, sometimes it's called the root fallacy, or, other names, I don't know. But this is what it is like when you're looking at a word, and then you get into the original language of it, you can't just break the word down into its parts and then say that that's what it, literally means. Okay, so like let's say you have a compound word, okay, like aperkamai. You can't just break it down and say, okay, apa means away from, and then erkamai means to go or to come, so therefore it means, this word must mean to go away. Like you can't just do that. Well, the truth is actually lots of times you can do that. And that's what it means. But you have to be cautious because that's not always the case. You've learned gnosko. Well, there's a word called epignosko. It's epi in front of gnosko. Now what does that mean? Well, sometimes when authors are using them next to one another, epignosko will mean more to recognize than to know sometimes. And sometimes epignosko seems to be an intensified version of gnosko, sometimes when Paul uses it that way. But other times, it's really hard to tell what the difference is. And if the author would have just used gnosko here, how would I have translated it differently? I probably would have done the exact same translation. So there's certain times when you can't do that. But other times, it makes perfect sense. Appa, erkamai, when you put them together, it means to depart, like to go away. Oh, this makes perfect sense. So just keep that in mind when you're translating. Sometimes you'll be able to break down the words and get their meaning. I want to give you one cool example real quick, which maybe you'll think is cool, or maybe you won't. Yay. Okay. Thumas, pretty common word, means, I don't even know if it's in this textbook, I'm not sure, but it means, it can mean a lot of things, but it can mean anger, but it can mean like passion, spirit, not like Holy Spirit stuff, but like spirit in that sort of way. You see when I'm going like that, how that differs. But it can mean anger, it can be bad, it can have a negative connotation. Macros, this might be in there, but I mean, you could probably determine what do you think that means. Macros, macro comes from macros?
Oh, macro, like
Big,
large.
small.
Yep, big, large, long, that sort of stuff. Well, there's a word called macrothumia. What do you think that means?
Desolation.
What?
Desolation.
No, well, good guess.
But you said we can't.
But looking at the parts, what might you guess? You might get like super angry,
No.
like
Raging or
berserker anger, crazy anger. You might think that, and actually I've heard of, what was that?
Godlike anger.
Godlike anger. Okay, these are good guesses. And I have heard a sermon in which an individual like really focused on this word and broke it down into his parts, and actually the emphasis he made was the exact opposite of actually what the word means. Because the root thing messed him up a little bit. So if you break it down into its parts, long, we're going to go with here, and anger, but it's actually, the sense of it is to abstain from anger for a long time. It can be long-suffering if it's old school, but it's usually patience. Patience is a very common gloss for macrothumia. So when you break it down into its parts, you can do that. But you need to know how to break it down into its parts. That is not a super long period of anger or passion, but actually a long time abstaining from thumia or thumas. So, I don't know.
They're having vacation, like, long time, no anger.
That's one of those things you have to know.
So, really quick, and then we'll take our break. Going back to the principal parts, a perichamai, when you're looking in the second column, you'll see that underneath it, there are some different forms, right?
Yes.
Apelusamai, apelotan, apelelutha, right? So those are different. The first one there is the future active indicative. The second one is the aorist active indicative. Third one is perfect active indicative. The last two are just dashes because they don't appear in the New Testament, so he doesn't give them to you. The reasons why he gives you those principal parts is because when you know the principal parts, then you know any form that verb could take. Because sometimes a word switches when it goes into a certain tense and it doesn't do the sometimes the stem changes. And so how would you be able to guess whether that stem is going to change unless you've memorized the future active indicative? So that's the logic behind it. But the majority of the time, the verbs follow the patterns that you learn and that you're used to. So there's a total of 6 principal parts. And yeah, you'll need to know them for certain verbs. Once we get a little further, I'm going to tell you particular verbs that I would strongly encourage you to learn all the principal parts. But for the rest of them, just kind of get used to them as you go, So anyway, that's principal parts really briefly. We'll go over them a lot and in more detail when we're covering the aorist.
I'll ask a quick question.
Yes.
Why in some cases is the first principal part in parentheses, and then in other listings it isn't?
Yes. So if there is a parenthetical principal part, that is the imperfect form. The imperfect isn't actually a principal part, but Mounce wanted to include it in his book. So he puts it in parentheses. If there aren't any, it's because it doesn't appear in the New Testament in the imperfect. But the imperfect is not considered a principal part because there's never stem changes for the imperfect. You always are, if you know the present tense stem, the lexical form, you're always able to form the perfect tense by knowing the imperfect tense by knowing the imperfect paradigm. There's never a stem change. So that's why grammars throughout the centuries haven't included that as a principal part.
So an example of that would be anekamai for I endure on 396. I'm just picking out the first one I saw.
On this they mean? Is that, or what are you looking at?
On page 396, first blue one on the leftmost column, right above it.
Oh, okay.
Anekamai?
Anekamai.
Yeah.
And then underneath you have anerchame.
Yeah. Is
Yep.
that the imperfect?
Yep, that's the imperfect, and that actually follows the rules perfectly. There's never stem changes with the imperfect.
Convenient.
But we'll get into that when we get there, so. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, come back just a little after 11:30.